Let's begin with MS Now's Inez de la Cuatara in Haifa, Israel. Former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Joel Rubin, the Brookings Institution's Michael O'Hanlon, and history professor and former merchant mariner Sal Mercogliano. Inez, we know that you're near an oil refinery that was hit overnight in Haifa. It's not the only site that was hit. What's the extent of the damage that you're seeing?
Hey, Ariel. Yeah, so here in Haifa, there was an oil refinery hit yesterday. We understand it was the electrical infrastructure that was damaged. But today, according to the company that runs the refinery, operations are back up and running. Most production units are back up and running. But that has really been the focus this week, is this back and forth, these attacks on energy facilities. Iran this morning saying that they will show zero restraints if attacks on their energy facilities continue. And that, of course, comes after Israel targeted the South Pars gas fields in Iran. That is Iran's biggest source of domestic energy. So Iran was furious. They retaliated by hitting Qatar, and specifically the Ras Laffan energy facility in Qatar, which is a huge source for liquefied natural gas that a number of countries around the world depend on. And so we've seen prices soaring already. The U.S. president said that he was not aware that Israel was preparing to carry out this attack on the South Pars gas field. And I will say it does appear like we're seeing a little bit of a divide emerging between President Trump and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Trump saying that he basically told Netanyahu not to continue going after Iran's energy supplies. And yesterday in a press conference, Netanyahu did say that Israel going forward would refrain from doing that. Interesting comments also from Netanyahu yesterday when he really came out to try and insist that the U.S. and Israel were in this together. He says that basically Israel did not drag the U.S. into this war, that the U.S. is not fighting Israel's war, that they're fighting this together. He also suggested there could be a ground component to regime change in Iran. He said that they're trying to create the right conditions for the people of Iran to topple the regime, but that there might be a need for a ground component because regime change doesn't happen from the air. So unclear what that means, but an interesting report this morning from Axios that cited 4 sources with knowledge of the issue that saying that Trump is considering plans to occupy or blockade Iran's Karg Island so as to force the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz.
Inez covering a lot of ground there. We appreciate it. Joel, Israel sees regime change in Iran as existential. The U.S. administration is apparently backing off of that, at least publicly, focusing instead on the ballistic missile capabilities, sinking the Iranian Navy, and preventing Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. Do you foresee a moment down the line here, maybe not imminently, but down the line, where the U.S. says enough's enough, we're done here, but Israel wants to keep going?
Yeah, Ariel. Well, right now there's no clear end date to this war, and so I think these end points are going to be defined in many ways by what happens on the ground. And certainly, from a strategic level, the United States and Israel are aligned. There were tactical differences with the Karg Island strike, as well as you noted. But I do think ultimately, if there are wins on the ground that the United States views as securing our interests, meaning related to gathering the enriched materials, clearly decimating and ending Iran's ability to project power through missiles, through drones, et cetera, that those may very well signal an end to hostilities by the United States. And that may create a difference with Israel, who, as you point out, they want to see this regime toppled and gone. Their role in these strikes in many ways is to go after the leadership of Iran, its intelligence leadership, military, and clearly political leadership, and try to foment some type of regime change there. That's where the difference may be. But it very much depends about what happens on the ground in the near term.
So, Michael, I want to get your thoughts on that. A 4th Iranian leader was killed this week, but the theocracy has spent 47-some years entrenching itself in power. How can Israel and the U.S. unwind that? Is regime change even realistic?
Ariel, it could be hoped for, but it's not particularly realistic. And I'm not sure Israel even believes in its own strategy, because we've also seen reports that Israel acknowledges the most likely outcome, if they call for regime change by Iranian protesters and demonstrators, is mass slaughter of those demonstrators by the regime. And it's not just remnants of the regime, it's the majority of the regime that's still very much in place, intact, and committed to its longstanding ideology. And moreover, of course, the regime claim, at a conceptual level, they want to reestablish deterrence, meaning they want to show the world that there's a price to pay when they're attacked. And hence, I think Joel's right. They will continue to fight for a while longer. But that's the sort of highbrow conceptual way to put it. The more sort of human way to put it is they want revenge. Their friends, their family have been killed. And moreover, their longstanding commitment to an ideological and violent form of revolution, I think, is unabated. So I'm afraid that it's going to be hard to figure out where and how we stop this. But I am pretty confident the Israeli maximalist goal of regime change is not within plausible ranges of outcomes here.
Yeah, even intel sources I've spoken to say that Israel and the U.S. can lay the groundwork or the scaffolding for regime change, but anybody who tells us that they know the outcome of this is lying to us. Michael, also, Trump just posted just now on Truth Social calling NATO allies cowards. He met with Japan's prime minister in that now infamous Oval Office meeting yesterday. Japan has now joined 5 other nations in agreeing, as they put it, to contribute appropriate efforts to ensure safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. We're talking about Britain, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands. What do they mean by appropriate action? What can these allies actually do materially to help reopen the strait?
First of all, I think the Prime Minister of Japan handled her visit brilliantly yesterday, in every way pitch perfect. But saying that appropriate action may be supported or undertaken by Japan does not tell us what that action would be. And I think Japan is a ways away from sending minesweepers to the Persian Gulf. Japan doesn't relish this kind of out-of-area combat activity. And I think more likely the Japanese would want to see more of a strategy develop. At what point do minesweepers go in? At what point are they safe enough? Does this require a ceasefire or at least a major diminution in Iranian attacks first? And in that sense, I think she's, again, finding a way to navigate a difficult situation without fully committing to a Japanese role. Obviously, she's got a better relationship with President Trump than most of the leaders of Europe that you just mentioned. And I just hope we don't get too far down the path of insulting each other. The Europeans are going to need some time to figure out, again, what the American strategy really is. And they don't appreciate being dragged into something that they had no role in consulting the U.S. about before it began. So I think we've got to give them a little bit of space to work through their options.
And they've made it clear they're not going to do anything under threat or when drones and ballistic missiles are flying. Sal, President Trump told reporters yesterday that he's not going to put boots on the ground in this war, but he's also not immediately going to tell the public if he's even considering that. You can kind of understand that from an intel perspective, operational perspective. The amphibious 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit is on its way to the region. Will securing the strait require boots on the ground? Is there any other way to achieve that?
Well, one of the things that we saw in the Red Sea was the U.S. military using air power in 2 separate operations, both Poseidon Archer and in Rough Rider, was never able to secure the Red Sea from the Houthi. The risk remained there throughout the process. So it's very difficult to ensure that you have 100% success rate to be able to sail in. Now, Persian Gulf, much different. It's a cul-de-sac. You have to sail into this region. There's no diversion around it. But I know, speaking to shipping companies, speaking to merchant mariners, their primary concern right now is the physical security of the ships and the 20,000 merchant mariners that are out there. What they want to see is some effort by the United States or other militaries to demonstrate that it's safe to sail through the Straits of Hormuz. If you're on board a loaded liquefied natural gas carrier, you really don't want to be a test case sailing through the Strait of Hormuz to see whether or not the Iranians are going to shoot at you. And right now, the Iranians are letting select ships through, but we're down in single digits, where normally we see about 138 ships a day go through the canal.
Yeah, it's quite a logjam to behold. And I know that you've spoken to crew members on one of those 3,200 ships that are stuck in the Gulf, and they tell you they're running out of supplies, running out of water. They've been denied permission to dock. So what's the situation like for the mariners out there?
It's getting a bit desperate out there. Number one, they're, of course, a little bit bored. They want something to happen right now, believe it or not. But they've been sitting there for over 3 weeks. These ships normally are on scheduled runs. They have very small crews on board, 20 to 30 people, limited food and water. They replenish when they go into port all the time. And now they're sitting there. They have to evade. They got to kind of keep dark on their AIS. Some of the ships are continually moving for fear of drone attacks, both aerial and surface. And then you had this case of a ship that had an operational issue where they ran out of water, asking permission to come into port, and the port refused them. The ports don't want to become targets. They don't want a lot of these high visibility ships into their ports. So they're kind of stranded. They're kind of caught in the middle of these 20,000 merchant mariners. The International Maritime Organization is trying to set up a safe zone or a safe lane through the Strait of Hormuz, but that took a long time to set up in the Black Sea, and I'm not very sure we're going to be able to see anything here materially in the short term.
Michael, the U.S. and Israel have crippled Iran's capabilities, but still the regime can launch maritime insurgency. Iran's pretty good at this lopsided warfare in the Strait. So far, it seems like their strategy to block the Strait is clearly working. But is control of Iran's Harg Island key to pressuring the Iranians into submission on this point?
It's certainly one option, but I don't know how you control it with just the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit. That's 2,000 total Marines. That's not a big force. Of course, we can use naval capability, but then naval ships can be shot at. And it's a dramatic escalation of the U.S. role and of American risks. It may not be a bad choice given the other possible scenarios, but I think President Trump's going to be pretty reluctant to really try to go through with these implied threats. Air power is one possibility, of course. We can certainly strike any target on that island we wish. But that sort of takes away the negotiating element here, because if you've destroyed it, then, unless you're just sort of destroying little by little, hoping that Iran cries uncle at some point along the way, you can't easily undo what you just done. So I still think, though, that the air power option is a more plausible one than either a naval blockade or a ground and marine operation.